Okay, so this is called anti-dilution revisited, and in the diluted EPS calculations that we've done so far, you were concerned that the per share effect was less than basic EPS, but this takes it another step further. And what GAAP really wants is the dilutive EPS or diluted EPS to be um, the lowest possible number. So, how mechanically do we achieve that? Well, we're going to calculate the per share effects, and any per share effect above basic we throw out. But of the remaining potentially or dilutive securities, not potentially, but dilutive securities, we're going to rank them from most to least dilutive, and we're going to add them sequentially. Okay, so you'll add one, see what diluted EPS is, add another one, see if it goes lower. If not, then you stop, you're done. And we find the worst case scenario. Okay, the best way to really see this is to just go through an example. And this is right out of your appendix in your textbook. The one I'm using here may be a little dated, but it hasn't changed. Um, the numbers haven't changed. Okay, so they're giving us a balance sheet so we can look at it and identify where there are potentially dilutive securities. You have an 8% convertible bond, a 10% convertible bond, 10% cumulative convertible preferred. Okay, so those are some securities we have to look at. And then they give us some facts from the notes to the financial statement. We have 50,000 shares in options, $20 strike price. Average market price was 30, so this is going to be dilutive because the 30 average market price is greater than 20, which is the exercise price. Okay. Both 8 and 10% bonds were issued in '09 at par, so we don't have to do the partial year adjustment. Um, the 10% convertible was issued at the beginning of 2010, so it's been outstanding the whole year. Here's the conversion ratio. And oh, I forgot, here's the conversion ratio for the 8 and the 10% for both is 40 shares for each bond. Here's the tax rate, so we can adjust interest net of tax. 500,000 shares of common stock were outstanding the whole year. So that means basic WAV, weighted average shares, equals 500,000. So they're not making the weighted average share calculation complicated because that's not what we're focusing on. There were no preferred dividends declared during the year. We only care if it's non cumulative. Let's go back and see what it said. I think it was cumulative. Yeah, it's cumulative, so we don't care about the declaration. That's meaningless. Okay. Net income was 1.75 million in 2010. No bonds of preferred stock were converted. So we could just do a quick basic EPS here. Net income is 1.75 million minus, we'll figure out the current year's accumulation, over 500,000. Excuse me. And let's see, convertible preferred stock. Where's my pen? We got 10%. We got $100 par, and we have 25,000 outstanding. So that's 10% times $100 times 25,000. So 10 times 25,000 looks like 250,000 preferred dividend adjustment. So looks like 1.5 million over 5 million, and I'm thinking that's $3 basic EPS. Oh, earnings per common share We have net income. I'm probably going to look like an idiot in 2 seconds because it's probably filled in the animation below. The preferred dividend adjustment was 250, 1.5 million, over 500,000, $3. Okay. Oh, it didn't, so that's good. Um, on the full PowerPoint, it has the animation, but that's where you end up. So here are the steps for computing diluted earnings per share the real way, the full way. We determine the per share effect for each. We rank from the smallest per share effect to largest. Okay, so we're doing the most dilutive first. And then beginning with uh, the number one, the smallest per share effect, we add it, then we add the next one, and we stop when it starts going up. Or we could do them all and pick the minimum. All right, so we have to determine the per share effect. I did mention that the warrants were they were dilutive because the average stock price during the year was greater than the exercise price. So we're going to use the treasury stock method. I'm going to do the formula here. You have this. It would be the market price minus the exercise price over the market price times the number of shares in the option grant. So that's 10 over 30 times 50,000, which is approximately 16,667. Okay, which they do this exactly mathematically, the same thing I do except in a column. All right, this gets you the same place. So what is this one again? It's market price minus exercise price over market price times the number of options. All right, that's a little bit out of control. Okay, now the per share effect, frankly, we wanted to go ahead and calculate the number of shares and you can keep that in your pocket, but we knew the per share effect was zero because there is no income effect, no numerator effect for treasury stock. Once we know that the average market price is greater than the exercise price, or in this case that 30 was greater than 20, we were done with respect to the per share effect, zero. All right, so moving ahead, the 8% bonds, and I'm going to do this in a ratio because I think you're going to get pretty fast at this, right? So, and you're going to want to save the numerator and the denominator, but let me do this in a ratio. It's 8%, and we're always going to have par value just to make it simple. And it's times 1 minus the tax rate, which is 1 minus 0.4, which is going to be 0.6. All right. Then we have to determine how many shares are issued. It's the number of bonds, which is always face value, divided by 1,000, so 2,500, times the conversion ratio. We have no month adjustment, so I mean, just for the sake of completeness, I could say 12 over 12 and 12 over 12, but that's just one. All right, and we put this together, what do we get? Interest expense net of tax is 120,000, and the number of shares issued upon conversion would have been, remember, this isn't really happening, we're saying if it would have happened, and this is $1.20. Okay, when you're doing this, I would suggest just lining up the ratios, but you do want to save your numerator and your denominator. So far we have 0 and $1.20. So 0 would be ranked 1 and $1.20 would be ranked 2, but let's keep going. Here's the 10% bond, and you can look at this slide in your leisure, at your leisure. I am going to just crank this out because you should really get it done this fast. 2.5 million divided by 1,000 times 40. It's going to be 150,000 divided by 100,000. Per share effect is $1.50, but once again, good to have the numerator and denominator handy. So you have first the warrants, 0 per share effect, rank number 1. 8% bond at $1.20, rank number 2. 10% bond at $1.50, rank number 3. And now we're going to go to the convertible cumulative preferred. So here we don't have any tax effect, but I did the calculation before. Let's do it again. 25,000 times 10% times 100 par value, all over 25,000 shares and a 4-to-1 conversion ratio. That's going to equal 250,000 over, oops, lost my pen, over 100,000. Per share effect is going to equal $2.50. Still lower than basic, but higher than everything else. So we have number 1, the warrants. Let's see. Here, we're going to rank them right here. Number 1, the warrants slash options. Those are the same thing. The 8% convertible bond, 10% convertible bond, and the 10% convertible preferred. Okay, so these are the ranks. From smallest per share effect to greatest. Most dilutive to least dilutive. So, what does this mean? What are we going to do with this? Now we're going to add the numerator and denominator components one by one. Calculate a diluted 1, a diluted 2, a diluted 3, a diluted 4. Diluted 1 has the options only. Diluted 2 have the effect of the options and the 8% convertible bond. Diluted EPS 3 will have the effect of the 10% convertible bond, the 8% convertible bond, and the option. Diluted 4 will contain all. Now, if any of these had been above basic EPS, you would have excluded them. But they're all below $3 per share. Okay, so what are we doing here? Well, let's start with the core of just a second. If you remember, net income minus the preferred dividend was 1.5 million. And that's why they're starting here with this number. This already has the preferred dividend adjustment out of it. And we had 500,000. Now we're going to add the options, which has a numerator effect of 0 and a denominator of 16,667. You put these all together, they're 290. Now, I know right away that we need to go on because the 8% bond is $1.20, okay, which is less than 290. So we'll keep going, and I'm going to keep using the ratio. So from the prior slide, we have 1.5 million, but we'll keep the 516,667. And now what do we add? 120,000 and 100,000. And that's 263. And I know we need to keep going because $1.50 for the 10% bond, rank number 3, is less than 263. So it has the potential for dragging down the diluted EPS. So our numerator is going to be 1.5 million plus 120,000 is 1.620000. The denominator is going to be the 100,000 added to the 516,667, which is 616,667. Now we're going to add the 150,000 from the 10% convertible bond, and we're going to add the 100,000 in shares. Went a little crazy over here. Now we're down to 247. We don't have to go on because 247 is less than 250. Okay? This is the smallest number we're going to get. So if I compare 247 to the per share effect, to the per share effect of the convertible preferred, this is smaller, so we stop. And this is diluted EPS. All right. They go ahead and do it anyway, and they get 247 again, but they only go out to here. Let me take these two numbers, 2020, 123, 816667, divide. I'm looking for my pen. S equals 2.4734. Oops, 3468. All right. And let's look at the one from above. 1770000. Oops, 1770. 716667 divide. This equals 2.4697663. So if we look at these two, 2.47 and 2.46, it did in fact increase, just not at the level of a penny. So I'm just trying to show you that you can save yourself some time if you recognize that the per share effect for the next potentially dilutive security is above your prior diluted EPS. You can stop. Now, if you went ahead and calculated it, no big deal. All you have to do is take the minimum, because this is diluted EPS, a worst case scenario. That is the way the FASB designed it. All right, so that's anti-dilution revisited. That is it. This is just going over the disclosure, basic and diluted. All right. And that's the final detail of what you'll have to do for diluted EPS.